Hi, I'm Alita Jackson, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this next Elevate session, Structuring Effective Organizations. We have a great panel and a lot to get through the next half hour that I know you're going to benefit from, so let's get started. If you want to participate in the conversation with your attendees, please feel free to comment in the chat, disagree, or just ask some questions. We all benefit from a robust dialogue. If you post on social media, please consider using our hashtag, Elevate. Let me start by telling you a little bit about myself. I'm currently based at a London-based equity firm called SDCL in the climate space, and I'm Executive Director of Sustainable Cities. But I previously worked for the New York City Mayor's Office for 15 years, with my last role as climate diplomat for New York City. The thing that ties all these things together is that I was a chemical engineering major in college, and I use that background every day. So I'm really thrilled to be part of this talk in particular. I'm also the lead singer of a 9-piece jazz funk band on the side, and I have a separate band in Scotland. So really left brain and right brain do go together in all these things. So that's me. Now let's get to know the panelists. Jennifer, I'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, hi, my name is Jennifer Krevitt. I am at Goldman Sachs. I have been at the firm for 24 years, all in people-related space, and really enjoy thinking about culture, people, the intersection of people, culture, technology, and data. And this panel is one that's of particular interest to me, to learn from my colleagues, and also to think about how we can all improve as we move forward in the new world order.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. And Erin, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Thanks for having all of us on. My name is Erin Merchant. I am currently on an extended sabbatical. I am generally spending that time both in some professional projects, i.e. things of this nature, and mostly personal projects, passion projects. In the future, I will be working in the capacity of a consultant, taking on clientele that's looking at how to grow their IT organization from a strategic and leadership development perspective, as well as how to have a manager's culture that starts with focusing on individual contributors and their growth throughout their lifespan at the organization.
That's fantastic. And just a sidebar, Erin, I took a 1.5-year sabbatical when I was 37, 17 years ago, and it changed my life. I changed my career. So I applaud you for doing that. Everyone should take some time out in their lives at some point. Matt, I want to turn to you.
Sure. I've never taken a sabbatical, but it sounds fantastic. Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Redler. I'm the founder of a company called Panther. We're a global payroll company that makes it effortless for other companies to hire anyone, anywhere in the world. So companies can access the entire world as their talent pool while we handle all the tricky bits.
Excellent. And last but certainly not least, Kimmy.
Thank you, Alita. Thank you for having me as well. I work currently for the World Wrestling Entertainment Company, Vice President of Human Resources over there, and really running the corporate side of the HR function at WWE. Focus primarily on basically people strategy with the senior leaders, and I've enjoyed it for the past 5 years with this team.
Fabulous. So we clearly have a great breadth of companies and experience that people are going to give to this discussion. So let's just jump right in. Kimmy, I think you'd be the best person to ask this first question. How do you manage very different roles under one roof? Wrestlers versus people in management, for example. We'd love to hear you talk about that.
We have a wide variety of roles at WWE, definitely. And you know how I look at that is it's not just about many different roles, but it's about the communication that comes from above. It's really about the clarity on what the goals are for the company, the metrics for the company, and how that filters down to each individual and how their role speaks to those specific goals and metrics and company targets. So it's not necessarily just you need to manage exactly specifically this person and this person's role, but really about the whole company and the goals of the company. So that's really how I think about it. I mean, it's not necessarily managing in a linear way. It's really managing around parameters of each role and making sure people really understand what their role is and how it relates to the overall company.
Excellent. And Jennifer, I want to turn to you. But before I say that, one thing I didn't say about my own background is I worked at Morgan Stanley for 12 years in my past life. And I always tell people there are all sorts of roles at a bank. Not everybody's an investment banker. Some people take the mail out. Some people clean the offices. Some people are administrative assistants. So you have the similar breadth of experiences that happen at Goldman. I would love to hear you talk about that a bit more.
Yeah, Goldman Sachs is a very large company that has so many different roles. And as you say, not everyone is a banker. Not everyone is even a revenue producer. In terms of that, more than a quarter of the organization are technologists. More than half the organization are folks that are value accelerators for the business, which is really interesting. And that's one of the things I like best about being in the people space at an organization like this, with the breadth and the depth of the talent, is that you need to meet all of the talent where they are and what they're looking for going forward. And so one of the things I think is, how do you motivate and engage everyone? How do you think broadly about rolling out programs, building a culture that's really meaningful and purposeful for everyone? And the way I think about that is focusing folks on the challenges at hand. So everybody has jobs, everybody has strategic goals, regardless of what level you're at, and everybody is a leader at their own level. And so I think broadly, you give people the challenge, the vision, the view of what needs to be done. You layer in passion and you let people have the room to grow and feel valued. And you give them the space to create these spaces, the ability to think broadly. And so I always say it really is about the breadth of the challenge, the passion, and then the space to grow. And that speaks to everybody. And culture is really important. And it is agnostic to where you are in the organization, what your role is, but we all need to be rowing and thinking, moving in the same way. And that's the exciting piece of focusing on people and culture for me.
Thank you, Jennifer. And then just Erin, really quickly, I wanted to turn to you to provide an answer if you have something you want to add to that.
Sure. I can follow up with two already amazing answers, especially one that translates no matter what function you're in as well. I think when I look at this, especially in the IT function, we have this difference between generalists and specialists. So at a mid-level, you're usually looking at the statement of, how do I have both of these people or these types of people work towards one unified cause? And it's not necessarily something about distilling out their personal perceptions of how they want to function in their role or their personalities, but more saying, we have a certain set of ideals that we are always striving towards, that we've agreed upon. And those are things that we also have a knowledge that both our leaders have agreed upon, and then same thing. So it's setting an example that will bring everybody together under one roof, and then also broadcasting that in such a way that it does unify with your culture and the other value sets that are coming to something that is usually, I don't want to say dry, because IT doesn't have to be dry, but something that is much more hard technical. And so we think a lot about that, about how we can also work with partners in our HR, our finance areas to make sure that we're both addressing the actual center of what it is that we need to do, our prime directive. But then on top of that, the way in which we can make people part of the process and make that a part of the larger culture that already exists. What that ultimately means is that we're all using a shared amount of language in both how we are technically responding. But on the other side, you're looking at a statement of bringing everyone into the process of participating in both their technological culture, which is really great when you're working in a hybrid or remote environment, but also in terms of making sure that people understand what the function of their role is, what the function of that section of the org is, and then how they can all interact and interplay and feel welcome when they need to go and seek help from those individuals or that department as well.
That's excellent. And I think communication, as we were all saying, is key. Everyone knowing what's expected, what's going to happen, what is coming. I think that's great. The next piece is the next question that I have really pertains to the now. So we're still in the middle of COVID, and some areas are much more effective than others. Some people are like, there's no way I'm going back to work because my kid can't be vaccinated. Other people like, I'm sick of being home. I want to be in every day. So you have a mix in between. Matt, I want to start with you on this one. What do you foresee happening in the next year or two with workforce structure, given where we are in the pandemic and given the attitudes that people have toward going back to work?
I think that an assumption that we've held for hundreds of years has been broken, which is that we needed to live around where we work. And so something that I think is going to fundamentally change in companies and workforces going forward is now that we've separated this idea of physical location from economic opportunity, we'll start to see companies optimize every role to hire the best person, no matter where they live. And so as a result, we'll start to see companies who are much closer to their customers, if they're serving customers all over the world. We'll start to see much more diverse workforces. But also, I think we'll be forced into new ways of communication and processes internally to work with incredible people all over the world. We need new processes that eat time zones for breakfast. And I think what that boils down to is lots of asynchronous communication. So recorded videos and documentations versus just, calling meetings every time a decision, no matter how big or small, needs to be made.
And I would add something which is interesting as we listen to Matt's introduction. As they say, a necessity is the mother of invention. If you think about the business that Matt does, where you can break down some of the barriers to move people and to facilitate that, you don't need to be a very large company to be able to have people in different locations in order to pay them. That's just one example, as that's Matt's firm. But that is so helpful in accelerating the ability to do what we need to do, meet our clients where they're located, whether you're a large multinational company or a small little firm, you too can have the power of being a multinational organization. And I think that's really helpful and important.
One interesting thing I read recently about this particular topic is that some workers of color have felt more comfortable working from home than in person, because in some meetings, in some situations, they haven't felt as comfortable being able to put forward their ideas. And I thought that was a pretty interesting outcome of the COVID time period. I'd like to go to a different question.
Real quick, I think it's,
Matt.
super relevant. I believe that completely. And I think part of the reason why is because as a result of working in this non-meeting way, I think that the best ideas are the ones that rise. It's no longer just the loudest voices. And so it's great to hear that people of color are, they are appreciating as a result, or that, they're having better outcomes as a result. But I think we're starting to see this for all groups of people.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And the introverts like me as well. I'm not one anymore, but I definitely used to be the person that didn't speak up in meetings that would grumble to the side at the end. So I think it's empowering those people. So thank you. Jennifer, I want to turn back to you about how do you think about setting and meeting D&I aspirational goals from such a large firm where there's folks all over the world and all sorts of cultures involved in that?
The fun part of working in 2021 is that I think everyone is essentially committed to diversity, inclusion, and a broad view of the workplace, ensuring that, as you say, introverts are heard, extroverts are also heard and moderated a little. I find Zoom to be amazing because we're all the same size square. And, I am not an introvert. I'm an extrovert. I get a lot of energy from others. And I think over the last year and a half, we extroverts have learned to do that in this two-dimensional world. And we introverts have really seen the power of ideas, which is really amazing. Goals and targets and measuring things is really important. We all know what is important is measurable, and what is measurable is important. And so when we think about aspirational goals, it's really who we want to be and where we want to be. We want them to be aspirational. We know that change takes time, and that there is an accelerating impact to the work that we do in the space of D&I, diversity and inclusion. And so many firms have set aspirational goals. We are focused on them from the start of recruiting, making sure that we spread broad nets out to make sure that there's a broader workforce that we're considering. Again, that ties back very nicely to meeting our candidates where they are, rather than insisting they work in particular places, in particular buildings. And I think that will make a big difference. We need to acknowledge, and this is just a broad question, that there is still work to do in the D&I space. We do want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity. And once they come into really strong cultures, which I think so many organizations pride themselves on, that they're able to navigate that comfortably and authentically. And so many very good organizations are very focused on both recruiting diverse talent, defined in so many different ways, bringing diverse and inclusive talent in to make sure that they are integrated effectively, and then ensuring that people move through the organization playing best to their strengths and skills. And that, to me, is a privilege to be in the people space, to be able to do that.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Go ahead,
Sorry,
please.
I don't mean to cut in. I just wanted to draw upon the connection between that and Matt's comments around the hybrid and the remote working and the ability to expand, because what we've seen as well is that ability to recruit not only in Fairfield County, Connecticut. And so by having people work in different locations and not married to this, you have to be in this office, it enables that expansion a little bit more. And I think that I hope to see a growth in that capacity.
Great. One sidebar comment I wanted to make. Another result of Zoom is you have no idea how tall someone is. So a lot of us actually discriminate a bit on height, like somebody's shorter or somebody's taller, and then you meet them like, oh, I thought you were completely different. So I've actually asked friends of mine to re-examine what they think about people based on height. That's just a sidebar I thought I'd add. I think this is the time for the last question. So all four of you would love for you to talk about what some of your top tips for structuring effective organizations would be. So maybe let's start with you, Erin.
Sure. There's a lot of nuggets that I think we've all kind of touched around, which is tying into the fact that now is a time for reinvention, but not necessarily one that needs to happen with great expediency. And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. That isn't to say that either of those can be antithetical to one another too, but it's really finding the most intentional ways in terms of rebuilding or readdressing what we assumed were normative and now no longer have to be exactly that. Matt said it really succinctly in the context of one of the earlier questions. There's a lot that I always think about as a technologist first, but really being people-centric in the technologist space. And one is that tooling is a great equalizer, and find the right amount right in the middle. Not because you want to minimize the amount of things that you have, but you also want to make sure that people have the same tools or the right tools for their work. I also think that that's one of the big, great equalizers that we have to work with right now. And it's a great way then of inventing culture, or also embedding and imbuing a really amazing onboarding experience from day one, and sometimes even pre-boarding for individuals through something that they know they will be sharing with their cohorts throughout their time at a company. So I think a lot about that. I've also been thinking about some lessons learned for me in the last couple of years, especially scrambling to prepare, going from a semi and non-prepared or semi and non fully remote company, one that made a lot of dramatic shift when we realized that we were going to have to work in a new way, is start earlier than you think you might need. Nobody had potentially, or at least I didn't have pandemic in my span of run books. But I was also looking at scaling along with that and what that was going to mean, both in terms of benefit and dramatic change at my previous work. And it's something I think about a lot now as I'm going to be working with a broader spectrum of clientele, is how early is the right time to start working on some development pathways for people? And what are the new ways in which you need to reinvent your job descriptions that are going to be malleable to a new type of workforce and a new type of individual who's going to be coming into a potentially new industry? And then how are you also looking at new numbers, to the point of metrics earlier? How are you looking at new numbers with your partner teams and your partner departments and your leadership to make sure that what they are seeing in terms of running the course, growing exponentially, maybe taking a breather, and then continuously right-sizing. So while I'm saying that expediency is not something that you need to have like at the forefront, there is the statement of malleability along with that. And it isn't to say that like your day is going to change consistently or the way that you're strategically thinking is going to change, but more so to the fact that having multiple plans is good. And I think we've already learned that lesson a few times over in the last year, but also being able to shift from one of those plans to the other unless you truly know that you have to take a very hard left turn.
Thank you. Great. Jennifer, would you like to tackle this question?
So thanks for the question. I agree with everything that was just said, so I'll try to be accretive to that. Culture is really important. And I think that senior leaders need to really be thoughtful on what kind of culture they're building in an organization and what kind of culture they are that persists. And sometimes we can all get our, put our heads down and forget that there is messaging from the top. And so being very clear and deliberate and intentional about who we want to be and how we want to get there is really important. And when I say we, I mean each of us on the teams that we are. Doesn't matter where you are in the organization, there is always someone more junior. There was always someone more senior. And if you think about yourself as a leader trying to build a culture within a culture and who you want to be and how you want to get there, it's makes for a really impactful career and opportunity. I think that the skills that are really important are advisory, analytical, being accountable, and being a trusted advisor and resilient. And that is those are the skills that I think that everyone can and should have, continue to focus on, and the organization can really become stronger and continue to push itself as we lean into each of our employees.
I love those four. I'm going to get those from you after the call. Jennifer and I are friends outside of this panel. Matt, would love to hear from you.
I love it. I think in this new world, we have to use first principles thinking. So that, one piece of advice that I would throw out there is not to take the way that we've worked in the past and copy paste it to the way that we're working today. And specifically, what I mean is that I think we should focus on more of an outcome-based mindset of what we ask of our teammates than an input-based one. In the office culture, the long hours were the currency. The type of management style was, making sure that people were there from dawn till dusk and that they didn't break any rules. I think in a more distributed environment, it's more about empowerment and helping everybody do their best work, but focusing on outcomes as that currency, because candidly, the stakes are just much higher when you're distributed and moving the needle matters more. But on a very positive note to everybody, no matter what their current management style is today, I will say that we're so incredibly early in these next stages. We are literally, if you think about it, we are in year 2 of the next industrial revolution that'll be on all of our kids' and grandkids' history books one day. And so when you recognize that, this is the area where we're going to make the most mistakes, where we'll have the worst tools, and where we'll have the least amount of processes, it's just really encouraging. And I'm bullish on this kind of transformation of the way that we work going forward.
Excellent. And Kimmy, you get the last word.
So there's a benefit of going last, is you can just agree with everyone because everybody's stolen everything you wanted to say. But I want to say something about history being created and what Matt said, because it reminds me of one statement, because just similar to Jennifer, I was actually at Lehman, and we had an intern who came into our company and I said, I worked at Lehman. She said, "Oh, I learned about that in my history books." Now that made me feel quite old. And so so you talk about our kids, that's what I felt. But I actually relate very closely to what Jennifer said, and I have it actually written down right in front of me before she even said it, but it's my biggest piece is culture. And what kind of culture are the leaders trying to create in structuring their organization? And I think one of a crucial piece of that is also, while structuring that and while having that culture and what you're trying to get to, it's also very important to think about the change management along the way. And I've seen where change management is not done well. Employees are somewhat lost in that change and lost in that structure. And so it's so important to make sure that they're brought along in that process and in that structure and in organizing an effective organization. So if you don't do that, then it becomes clearly ineffective. So I wanted to just point that out as part of, like, once you get focus on the culture, you have to focus on getting there as well. And so that's, and I strongly believe that that's also, as Jennifer said, you have all levels, but it's going to be the leaders that are essentially driving that culture. And so it's making sure that those people are involved in that process. So that is so crucial to me, but I strongly agree with what everybody else said as well.
Excellent. And we're going to end there. This has been an excellent panel. I want to thank all of you panelists who have given us some great insights. And now I want to turn it back to our host.